those things are.
Exactly.
It depends what you get projected work instead of having cocktail.
Lavish ones. Some of the solutions.
Considered to be the or, even though, hopefully set up a neighborhood killed so easily. That's very important.
Once again, America is at the brink of financial catastrophe with devastating, disastrous, and brutal spending cuts set to take place in a little over 24 hours. At least that's the breathless scenario being painted. At stake, hundreds of thousands of jobs, especially among teachers, massive cuts in defense spending, business loans, science research, you name it. But a political stalemate blocks any resolution.
The sequester will weaken America's economic recovery. It will weaken our military readiness. And it will weaken the basic services that the American people depend on every single day.
For 16 months, the president's been traveling all over the country, holding rallies instead of sitting down with Senate leaders in order to try to forge an agreement over there in order to move the bill. We have moved a bill in the House twice. We should not have to move a third bill before the Senate gets off their and begins to do something.
Ouch. Joining us today to sort out the debate, Republican analyst John Tiene and Democratic analyst Brendan Gill. Well, guys, Boehner kind of put it very succinctly.
Can't imagine why they're not getting anything done.
Here we are again.
Well, yeah, and that's the troubling thing. We go from brink to brink to brink.
Yeah, we had the movie, Financial Cliff was the first premier fiscal cliff, and now this is the sequel, Sequester.
Exactly.
And same storyline.
Let me ask you both, what's at stake here? What is going on in Washington that we have to deal with things in this way?
I think it's a grand frustration on both sides. The Republicans have moved the bill. Yes, they have a very, very narrow area that they want to work in terms of trying to resolve this. But at the same time, the president hasn't done much of anything. He's given wonderful speeches. He's running around the country campaigning, but he hasn't called one congressman to the White House to try to talk this through. He hasn't done any. In fact, he's going to have a meeting tomorrow after the deadline. Where's the leadership? Where is he trying to bring people together?
I think that's the issue, John. He is being a leader by taking his case to the American people, because there's a very narrow group of people in your own party who have hijacked your party and this government.
Well, I haven't hijacked it,
and let me just finish on this. Let me finish this point. What he has continually talked about is compromise, bipartisanship. We hear it being talked about in our own state here in New Jersey by our governor, and that's the same thing that our president is talking about each and every day.
He keeps talking, but he doesn't do anything. The last several years, the president has played over 150 rounds of golf. Do you know how many members of Congress he's included in those rounds of golf to get to know them, to try to build relationships?
Listen,
two, both are Democratic leaders. How many congressmen has he brought in to the White House?
He did play a round with
one round, but how many people did he bring to the White House to try to build a coalition beyond this narrow group of people that the Democrats like to blame? None.
It's not a narrow group of people, and that's the problem. He is about getting something done, a compromise. It's a very simple proposition. You're talking about not just spending cuts, but doing something reasonably and responsibly. And he does not. He as the president.
We've already done the revenue enhancing. The president and the Republicans got together at the beginning of the year, and they dealt with taxes. They increased taxes.
It's not just the revenue.
It's not just the revenue. The president has speech the other day, and all he talked about was, I need more taxes.
It's not just the revenue, John. It's a reasonable and balanced approach. And that is something that your speaker and the leadership in your party just can't wrap their heads around.
They have. Let me pose
this.
There's been no proposals from the White House on how to do this. None.
Let me pose this. According to what we're reading here, the president wants a mix of cuts in spending and taxes on the wealthy. Republicans want just the spending cuts, and they don't want to deal with closing the loopholes in the tax code for the wealthy.
We've already done. Remember, earlier this year, when the Bush tax cuts were set to expire, the Republicans and the president came together, and they dealt with it, and they increased taxes on the wealthy. They agreed to that.
But apparently it's not enough. So
but the Republicans have sent up two proposals. Out of the House, they've passed it, and they sent it over to the democratically controlled Senate. The president has yet to articulate in any detail what he would do or what he would like to see. He speaks in
not
these
true.
grand, broad terms,
That's not true.
but doesn't
That's not true.
provide any specificity at all.
He's talked specifically, as was just noted, about closing loopholes in the tax code in order to increase revenue. He's talked targetedly about where those investments would take place. And I think the worst thing, investments in this
Where are the
country,
cuts?
and the worst thing. Listen, anybody who runs a business knows that there's two sides to a balance
Believe
sheet,
me, I know.
and this is something that your leadership of your party can't get their heads around. There is spending and there is revenue. And if you spend all of your time on the spending side of the ledger, your business is doomed from failure. And that's why the Republican plan is doomed this country for failure.
With the revenue side
No, we
earlier
have
this
not.
year,
Close,
and the president
not-
refuses to be specific
there-
about
there's-
spending cuts.
There's been
not
some
true.
movement on a part of the revenue picture, but not enough, according to the experts. Now, here's a question. And this is probably better thrown at you, John. There is a rift in the Republican Party,
yeah.
and even John Boehner's had problems trying to bring everybody together to bring a consensus to the
Yes.
table. What does he need to do at this point?
Well, I think if the president were to engage a little bit more, that would really help.
That would help him with the.
I think it would definitely. I mean, part of the power of the presidency is your ability to bring people to the White House and sit with the president of the United States
also
and try to build a relationship
and
and try to build. And
John, the power of the presidency is also to take the case of the American people, and that's what
But
he's
let's-
done. And if you look,
remember what the
look
American people did. They reelected the Republican Congress.
and they reelected overwhelmingly Barack Obama as
Right,
the president of the
which
United
said
States.
come together.
And most importantly, if you look again, you and I are both students of polling and public polling. If you look at the public polling right now, the president is making the successful case. They are holding the leadership of your party responsible for what's about to happen,
I don't think
and
so.
you
I
have
don't
to
think
deal
so.
with
I
that.
think one of the reasons the president's out campaigning is because he's trying to build a buffer so that when this happens, which I think it's going to happen, he doesn't want to be blamed for it.
Well, finally, one thing we agree on, I think it's going to happen.
So it's going to happen, but the president doesn't want to be blamed for it. The Republicans don't want to be blamed for it. But he's the president of the United States.
But you can't have.
Don't spend your
consensus.
time running around the country blaming Congress. Be in
can
Washington
you
and bringing them
have-
together.
You didn't hear in that clip, he's not blaming Congress. What he's doing is, again, making the case about what this potentially means to our economic recovery, which we all can agree
He's trying
we do not
to
want to
scare
side.
people.
Oh.
And why is he out doing that when he should be in Washington calling meetings? Why is the first meeting that the president is having on this problem the day after the deadline?
Listen,
The Nonpartisan Office of Budget, there's a long name for that office.
Yes.
But they've indicated that the president has been correct on his assessment of what will happen with these cuts.
There's no question. These cuts are
And-
going to have a terrible impact on the economy.
And when you look at a party that's been normally hawkish on defense spending, the question then becomes, are you more interested in what's better for the American people, or are you just more interested in defeating the president?
No, I think what this is a political reality, which is neither side wants to actually vote for these cuts. Both sides know these cuts have to happen in some manner. They know they need to shrink government. But neither side really wants to be able to say, I actually pulled the trigger and voted for it. This sequester mechanism allows them to run around and blame each other, but it does allow the cuts to happen. And I think this is part of the president's strategy. He knows he needs to do this, but he doesn't want to be blamed for it. He's out raising $500 million for a political action committee to protect them.
Completely disagree. I mean, ultimately, what you have is a situation where not just military spending, Brian. What we're talking about is cuts in health benefits for those serving in our military. We're talking about cuts for teachers. We're talking about cuts for students and student aides. We're talking about cuts for people who work in the airport, FAA. This is draconian in nature, and he's not scaring the American people by telling him that. But he is, yes, he is the president, John, but ultimately it's the other party's responsibility as well to put something on the table that could even be worked with.
Let's not forget how we got here. We got here because Barack Obama couldn't provide the lead. No, it wasn't process.
No one cares about that. What they want to see is something getting done.
The president put the sequestration on the table and created it years ago and said, it's never going to happen. I'll never let it happen. And here it is, it's going to happen.
Obviously, a debate we're not going to end here today, but thanks both of you guys for coming in and chatting with us. We
Thanks.
appreciate it.